I think it is crucially important to understand and learn the after effects to war. And this notion of um, nuclear bombs. I think what stuck out with me the most is the fact that these group of individuals felt like they were just being displaced, and having this notion of some people are very much unaware to the problems that exist post a nuclear bomb being dropped. There was a shot within the documentary as someone is flipping through pages of how veterans and people alike have passed away in these areas, and it's cancer, cancer, cancer. And we hear from certain individuals um, who are still with us and have had their own struggles and have seen uh, just from being where they live, simple as that, living in between the mountains, and seeing the damages that it has caused to a group of people, to land, and to Earth itself. And so it's a notion. Um, I think about the quote, all is fair in love and war. And that's something that's been on the top of my mind a lot recently. And war isn't fair. There's a lot of loss and things that come to that. And they make this bold statement at the end of the piece of nuclear plants, nuclear bombs, all of these things. They're not only going to destroy humanity, they're going to destroy the earth itself. And human responsibility. It's our responsibility to tell us that maybe we don't need this.
A fascinating documentary detailing the aftermath of bombs and how these nuclear bombs have killed several people years after it's already happened. Silent Fallout was a great and informative and educational documentary that shines light on how these issues have been raised over these years and how people around them have died with unusual deaths. It's a sad story knowing that this has happened to several people out there and not much is really being made to help them or aid them in any certain way. I thought this documentary was really eye-opening and it was really well put together as well as the choice in the soundtrack really put everything into perspective.
This I felt was so interesting and so fascinating to learn about because again, it's one of those things that isn't really taught in our history, at least not definitely not in the history that I went through, was not part of the curriculum that there was all of these things that kind of led to the test ban treaty, that there were these effects, there were these studies, there were these programs with the teeth to try and find out like what is the spread of this, what is the scope of this, and then to learn that it's not even necessarily the tests that were happening in Nevada, but also the tests that were happening from not just the US, but from different countries that were happening in the Pacific, that were happening in these different, islands and things like that. Like the scope of the fallout, the scope of the aftermath and everything is so much wider than I thought is so it's mind-blowing to be honest. So I thought that this was a really thorough movie. I loved all of it because you got a lot of information, but it didn't feel overwhelming. They took the time to kind of walk you through everything instead of throwing all the information at you and just hoping that you can absorb it all. They had sourced everything back. They had, personal stories and testimonies, which offer such a fantastic perspective. But then they also added in the studies that they were learning about, the studies that they found, that even they participated in, and then what they can still look at and still see with, the geologists and with the, climate scientists and things like that, so they can still see the effects all these years later and even point to what was causing all of this.
So this is like documentary that exposed like the dark secret of the government and try to show like the aftermath, like the effect and the response like to the nuclear bomb like experiment like during the time. And one thing that kind of like sparked my interest is like women like housewives who care for their family like stood up against like the authority and try to like make them reconsider like how they run the project during the time. So this is something that I never heard like in the history like classes, and this is such like a bright eye-opening like lesson like from this documentary with the use of interviewing shots, the footages, and the details that they include in this documentary. I feel like it's so rich, it's so well detailed, but at the same time, it has like the message and narrative like to going through with the documentary as well. So it's well put together, and it just kind of like educate us more like even though we are like tainted by the government, by the authority, but there might be something that turn against us by them, and we need to stood up for ourselves as an individual or a community for well-being life.
The film was excellent in the style of investigative journalism. The stats provided were unbelievable. So much cancer can be linked. Fascinating archival photos and videos about the origin of this testing and the people being exposed. I thought Alec Baldwin did a good job as narrator, very sympathetic tone in his read, and the eerie music throughout most of the film was so suitable for the tone of the piece. I also really appreciated the forward thinking of this documentary.
I liked the images at the start that really drew me into the issue and made me curious about how it was relevant to the audience of the film. And then I think it's a really great choice to follow along the main speaker through her life and the effects of the testing on the town. And overall, it's a really interesting and easy to sink into documentary.